June 6, 2015. Clinton Correctional Facility, Dannemora, New York. 2 convicted murderers cut holes through steel walls, crawled through pipes, tunneled through sewers, and escaped from a maximum security prison. The first escape in over 100 years. How? A 51-year-old prison employee named Joyce Mitchell. Married. Mother. Tailor shop supervisor. She fell in love. Not with one inmate. With 2. She smuggled them hacksaw blades hidden in frozen hamburger meat. She sent them naked photos. She had sex with them in her workshop. She helped them plan every detail of the escape. She even agreed to murder her own husband so she could run away with them. This is the story of forbidden love behind bars, where isolation becomes obsession, where loneliness becomes manipulation. Welcome to the world of dangerous attachments in prison. According to the Department of Justice, 84% of relationships between female correction staff and inmates appeared to be willing. That means the majority weren't forced. They weren't coerced at first. They were consensual. At least, that's how they started. But here's the legal reality. Inmates cannot legally consent to relationships with corrections officers. Ever. The power imbalance is too extreme. The Prison Rape Elimination Act passed in 2003 makes all sexual contact between staff and inmates a federal crime. Doesn't matter if both people say they wanted it. Under federal law, it's automatically sexual abuse. Why? Because corrections officers control every aspect of inmates' lives. When they eat, when they shower, when they sleep, whether lights stay on or off, who they can call, what they can read. An inmate cannot say no to someone who controls their entire existence. Former Corrections Officer Robin K. Miller explains, inmates are con artists. They know how to play the game and they know how to manipulate. Subscribe now. This story gets darker. Hit that notification bell. Joyce Tilly Mitchell, age 51. Married to Lyle Mitchell, also a prison employee. No criminal record. Solid work history. Supervisor of the tailor shop at Clinton Correctional Facility for 7 years. She seemed normal, unremarkable. But according to the New York Inspector General's report, Mitchell had a history. Supervisors describe her as an inmate lover who would sweet-talk prisoners into getting things done her way. She gave inmates special treatment, brought them homemade food, cookies, brownies, barbecue chicken, spare ribs cooked on her home grill. She found it difficult, she admitted, to maintain proper separation. I will visit with the guys, Mitchell told investigators. You get a rapport with them because you are in that same room with them every day of the week. That rapport turned dangerous. Mitchell's improper interactions with inmates were long known to her supervisors and observed by correction officers. Yet no effective action was taken. The tailor shop became what investigators called a permissive environment, where rules weren't enforced. And 2 convicted murderers noticed. Richard William Matt, age 48, serving 25 years to life for murdering his former boss, 76-year-old William Rickerson, dismembering the body, and hiding remains in the Niagara River. Matt was a talented artist. He painted elaborate portraits and landscapes. He used his art as currency in prison. Guards wanted his paintings. Matt gave them paintings in exchange for favors. Smuggled items, special privileges. But Matt's real talent wasn't art. It was manipulation, especially of women. They looked at her characteristics, and they took advantage of her. Clinton County Sheriff David Favreau said about Mitchell. Matt zeroed in on Mitchell's vulnerabilities. Her need for attention, her desire to feel special, her unhappiness in her marriage. He made her feel beautiful, desired, important. I was caught up in the fantasy, Mitchell later admitted. I enjoyed the attention, the feeling both of them gave me, and the thought of a different life. Matt convinced Mitchell he loved her. They began having sex in the tailor shop. Multiple encounters. While other inmates worked nearby. While correction officers walked past. The relationship escalated. And Matt had plans. David Sweat, age 34. Serving life without parole for shooting and killing Broome County Sheriff's Deputy Kevin Tarsia during a burglary. Sweat was younger than Matt, fit, attractive. He paid Mitchell constant attention. Former inmate Eric Jensen, who worked in the tailor shop, said Sweat and Mitchell had a joke. It was like, that was his boo, that was his girl. Sweat sent Mitchell sexually explicit notes. She sent him naked photos of herself. She professed her love for Sweat in notes she secretly sent him, the Inspector General's report revealed. But Sweat didn't love Mitchell. Neither did Matt. They were using her. Prison officials had even investigated allegations that Mitchell and Sweat engaged in sexual activity. The claims were never substantiated, but they removed Sweat from Mitchell's tailor shop anyway. That's when Matt became the middleman, passing notes between Mitchell and Sweat, passing sexually explicit photos, keeping both relationships alive. And slowly, carefully, Matt and Sweat planted an idea in Mitchell's mind: escape. The three of them, together. A new life, freedom, love. It was all a lie, but Mitchell believed it. How do inmates manipulate corrections officers? Former correctional officer Tamara explains the pattern. First, they target vulnerabilities. I believe that a lot of times the females that engage in this type of ethical suicide have major issues going on with themselves before they are even hired, Tamara says. A lot of them are single mothers who are looking to fill a void in their lives, whether it be not having a spouse or a father figure on the outside. Inmates study staff members. They identify who's unhappy, who's lonely, who has low self-esteem. One inmate we'll call Mac explains his strategy. I love when I see a new, young, and naive female working in prison. Shit, I can be their daddy, I can be their man, their boyfriend, best friend, or whoever they need me to be. It starts small. Flirting at mail call. Asking if the guard's office needs cleaning. Then escalates. Asking for small favors, being allowed to eat early, looking something up on the internet. Each yes makes the next request easier. The slippery slope. By the time sexual contact happens, the corrections officer is already compromised, already breaking rules, already in too deep. Sometime around January 2015, Matt and Sweat approached Mitchell about helping them escape. They needed tools. Mitchell agreed. She bought hacksaw blades, chisels, drill bits. But how to smuggle them into a maximum security prison? Mitchell came up with a plan. Freeze them inside hamburger meat. She wrapped the tools in plastic, buried them in ground beef, froze the packages solid, then brought them to work. The meat went to another prison employee, Correction Officer Gene Palmer, who didn't know about the hidden contraband. Palmer delivered the food to Matt and Sweat in their cells. Prison rules prohibited this, but Palmer wanted Matt's artwork. Matt gave Palmer paintings. Palmer gave Matt frozen hamburger meat full of escape tools. Nobody x-rayed the meat. Nobody questioned it. For months, Mitchell smuggled tools this way. After a couple of days, Matt told me he and Sweat had cut the holes and were going down in the pipes, Mitchell told police. I was already bringing stuff into him and didn't really feel I could stop. She was trapped, complicit, and the escape plan was moving forward. Matt called Joyce's husband the glitch. Lyle Mitchell was the problem. He was in the way. Matt convinced Joyce they needed to kill him. The plan: Joyce would give Lyle 2 pills to incapacitate him. Then Matt and Sweat would murder him after the escape. Make it look like an accident or natural causes. Joyce agreed. She took the pills for Matt. She went home to her husband, the man she'd been married to for years, the father of her children. She looked at him, and she couldn't do it. I didn't want anything to happen to Lyle, and I couldn't imagine being without him, Mitchell later said. She threw the pills away, kept the escape plan, but abandoned the murder plot. This decision probably saved Lyle's life, but it also meant Mitchell would have to face her husband after helping 2 killers escape. Face his betrayal, his heartbreak, his confusion. Lyle Mitchell told NBC's Today Show to just get me out of the way. But she said she was never going through with it. That's what she told me, that she really loved me and she was in too deep. June 5, 2015. Night. Matt and Sweat put their plan into action. Using the tools Mitchell smuggled, they'd been cutting through their cell walls for months. They created holes large enough to crawl through. Behind the walls, catwalks. 6 stories high. They climbed down, used power tools to cut through steel pipes, tunneled through brick obstacles, finally reached the prison's underground sewer system. They crawled through a steam pipe 18 to 24 inches wide for 400 feet until they reached a manhole cover just outside the prison walls. They pushed it open, climbed out onto a Dannemora street, left a note on the pipe reading, "Have a nice day," with a smiley face. June 6, 2015, 5:17 a.m. Guards discover both men missing during bed check. Clothes stuffed under sheets to look like sleeping bodies. But the cells are empty. The first escape from Clinton Correctional Facility's maximum security section in over 100 years. Joyce Mitchell was supposed to pick them up, drive them to freedom. She never showed. Joyce Mitchell had agreed to everything. The escape, the getaway car, guns, ammunition, camping gear, a compass. She'd collected it all. She was supposed to meet Matt and Sweat outside the prison at a specific time, drive them away, start their new life together. But when the moment came, she panicked. According to relatives, Mitchell developed chest pains, a panic attack. She checked herself into Alice Hyde Medical Center in Malone, claimed nervousness. The men were on their own. Joyce Mitchell, in my mind, would have just been luggage and would have slowed them down, Sheriff Favreau later said. If she went with them, I believe she would have been killed. I mean, why keep her? It makes no sense. Mitchell didn't realize it at the time, but her panic attack probably saved her life. Matt and Sweat never loved her. They used her. Once free, she was expendable, a liability, a witness. They would have murdered her within days, just like they planned to murder her husband. Mitchell's fantasy of love and escape was always doomed. She just didn't know it yet. We're 10 minutes in. The manhunt and Mitchell's arrest are next. Keep watching. The escape triggered the largest manhunt in New York history. More than 1,000 local, state, federal, and Canadian law enforcement officers deployed. Helicopters, bloodhounds, roadblocks everywhere. Residents near Dannemora were told they couldn't leave their homes. Schools closed. Businesses shut down. The search cost approximately $1 million per day. 23 days. $23 million total. Governor Andrew Cuomo canceled his appearance at the Belmont Stakes and flew to the prison. They could be anywhere in the state by this time, he said. The state offered a $100,000 reward for information. Police received more than 150 leads daily, but no concrete sightings. Matt and Sweat had vanished into the Adirondack Mountains. They had a head start. They had survival skills. And they were desperate. Authorities knew these men would kill anyone who got in their way. This wasn't just an escape. It was an active threat. 2 convicted murderers with nothing to lose, running through rural communities. Every resident was a potential victim. The pressure was enormous. Find them. Fast. June 12, 2015. 6 days after the escape. Authorities had questioned prison employees trying to figure out how Matt and Sweat got tools. All prison tools were accounted for. Someone smuggled contraband from outside. Investigators zeroed in on Joyce Mitchell. Surveillance. Phone records. Witness statements. Everything pointed to her. New York State Police arrested Mitchell at her home. Charged her with first-degree promoting prison contraband, a felony carrying up to 7 years, and criminal facilitation, a misdemeanor. She was arraigned in Plattsburgh City Court. Bail set. Sent to Clinton County Jail, the same county where she helped 2 men escape. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Mitchell's mugshot went viral. National news. The prison seamstress who fell in love, who smuggled tools in frozen meat, who planned to run away with convicted killers, who agreed to murder her husband. Media descended on Dannemora. Everyone wanted to know, how does this happen? How does a 51-year-old married woman become so obsessed with inmates that she commits felonies? Risks everything? Destroys her life? June 26, 2015. 20 days into the manhunt. Law enforcement receives a tip. Someone spotted Matt near a cabin in Malone, New York, about 35 miles west of the prison. A tactical team responds. They find Matt in a wooded area. He's armed. They order him to surrender. He refuses. A standoff ensues. Then shots fired. Border Patrol agent Christopher Voss shoots Matt twice in the head. Richard William Matt dies at the scene. Age 49. The man who manipulated Joyce Mitchell, who convinced her to smuggle tools, who planned to kill her husband, who was going to murder her once she became inconvenient. Dead in the woods. One down. One still running. David Sweat remained at large. Authorities intensified the search. They knew Sweat was alone now, potentially more dangerous, more desperate. He'd lost his partner. His plan had failed. He had no supplies, no help, just survival instinct and a determination not to go back to prison. The manhunt entered its final phase. June 28, 2015, 2 days after Matt's death. State Trooper Sergeant J. Cook is on patrol near the Canadian border. He spots a man walking on a road. Something's off. The man matches Sweat's description. Cook approaches. The man runs. Cook gives chase into an open field. Stop. State Police. Sweat keeps running, heading toward the tree line, toward Canada. Cook draws his weapon, fires twice, hits Sweat in the torso. Sweat goes down, just 1.5 miles from the Canadian border, minutes from freedom. Cook handcuffs him, calls for backup and medical assistance. Sweat survives his injuries. The escape is over. 23 days. $23 million. 1 inmate dead. 1 captured. And Joyce Mitchell sitting in jail, realizing her fantasy destroyed everything. Her marriage, her career, her freedom, her reputation, for men who never loved her, who would have killed her, who used her and threw her away. Governor Cuomo called Trooper Cook a hero. The community celebrated, but questions remained. How did this happen? And how do we prevent it from happening again? In police interrogation, Mitchell confessed everything. The sexual relationships, the smuggled tools, the escape plan, the murder plot. This is by far the worst mistake I have ever made in my life, Mitchell said. I live with regret every day and will for the rest of my life. She described Matt as controlling, manipulative. I was caught up in the fantasy. I enjoyed the attention, the feeling both of them gave me, and the thought of a different life. Mitchell claimed Matt forced her to have sex, that she felt trapped. Investigators didn't buy it. Her actions showed willing participation. The notes, the photos, the elaborate planning. This wasn't coercion. This was obsession. Former Corrections Officer Robin K. Miller explained what happened. They look for the weak. They look for insecurity. They look if they're beautiful body parts, the unintelligent, the not so bright, and then they look for the hustler females, and then they look for the promiscuous females. Mitchell fit the profile, and Matt and Sweat exploited every vulnerability until she was completely compromised, until she couldn't say no, until she was willing to help murderers escape, and even kill for them. September 2015. Joyce Mitchell pleaded guilty to promoting prison contraband and criminal facilitation. She was sentenced to 2 1/3 to 7 years in prison, fined $6,375, ordered to pay $79,841 in restitution for the manhunt costs. Mitchell sobbed during sentencing. Her attorney argued she was manipulated, a victim herself. The judge didn't agree. Mitchell made choices. She smuggled tools. She engaged in sexual relationships with inmates. She agreed to murder her husband. Those weren't the actions of a victim. Those were the actions of someone who let fantasy override judgment. Mitchell was sent to Bedford Hills Correctional Facility, the same type of facility where she once supervised inmates. Now she was one of them, wearing an inmate uniform, living in a cell, following orders, experiencing the powerlessness she once held over others. Her husband Lyle stood by her initially, visited her in prison, but the marriage never recovered. The betrayal was too deep, too public, too humiliating. Lyle Mitchell eventually filed for divorce. Joyce Mitchell lost everything for a fantasy that was never real. Joyce Mitchell wasn't the only employee compromised. Correction Officer Gene Palmer, age 57, was also arrested, charged with promoting prison contraband and tampering with evidence. Palmer admitted he smuggled tools into the prison for Richard Matt. Not hidden in meat, Palmer didn't know about Mitchell's smuggling. He brought tools directly. Why? Matt was paying him. Not with money, with artwork. Matt painted elaborate pictures. Palmer wanted them. Matt said he needed tools for art projects. Palmer believed him, or chose to believe him. Either way, Palmer violated every rule, brought contraband to a convicted murderer, enabled an escape, destroyed the security of an entire facility. Palmer pleaded guilty, sentenced to 6 months in jail, loss of his pension, public humiliation. Palmer insisted he didn't know about the escape plan. Investigators believed him. He was useful, manipulated, but not part of the conspiracy. Still, his actions enabled 2 killers to escape, enabled a 23-day manhunt, cost taxpayers $23 million, put communities at risk. Palmer's paintings from Matt weren't worth it. Nothing was worth what happened. But Palmer, like Mitchell, learned too late. Dr. Brenda Smith, director of the Project on Addressing Prison Rape and law professor at American University, explains, it is sort of the construct of supervision in these settings that creates those environments and those opportunities. Prisons are sexualized environments. Male inmates lack privacy. Female staff members face constant sexual harassment from inmates and sometimes other staff. Close proximity, long hours, emotional vulnerability. These factors create dangerous dynamics. Inmates and staff work together daily, share meals, have conversations, develop rapport. That rapport crosses boundaries. Small violations lead to larger ones. A flirtatious comment becomes an inappropriate touch. An inappropriate touch becomes a sexual encounter. A sexual encounter becomes an emotional attachment. And emotional attachment becomes manipulation, blackmail, coercion. Once boundary violations begin, they often increase in frequency, severity, and the number of people involved. Research shows it's a slippery slope, and certain inmates actively seek these relationships. They strategize. They manipulate. They exploit vulnerabilities. Former Corrections Officer Tamara says, I hate to say it, but a lot of correctional officers, male and female, have low self-esteem, which can lead to them befriending or starting relationships with inmates. April 29, 2022. History repeated itself. Lauderdale County Jail, Alabama. Assistant Director of Corrections Vicki White, age 56, drove away from the facility with inmate Casey White, no relation, age 38, hidden in the back seat. Casey was a convicted murderer awaiting trial for additional charges. Vicki had developed a romantic relationship with him. She sold her house weeks before, told co-workers she was retiring. On escape day, she claimed she was taking Casey for a mental health evaluation. No evaluation was scheduled. Surveillance showed they drove straight to a shopping center, switched vehicles, disappeared. An 11-day manhunt ensued. Authorities tracked them to Vanderburgh County, Indiana. A high-speed chase ended when their vehicle crashed. Vicki White was found with a gunshot wound to the head. She died at the hospital. Casey White surrendered. Vicki White threw away her career, her reputation, and ultimately her life for an inmate who saw her as an escape opportunity. Just like Joyce Mitchell. Just like countless other corrections officers who believe dangerous criminals love them. The pattern repeats, and people keep dying. Retention boost. We're almost done. The shocking conclusion is next. Keep watching. These cases make headlines, but they're not rare. Relationships between corrections officers and inmates are a very common story, according to experts. Every week, news reports surface. Female prison guard arrested for sex with inmate. Correctional officer charged with smuggling contraband for boyfriend in prison. Prison employee pregnant by inmate. In Rhode Island, A correctional officer faced 3 charges for sexual relations with an inmate. In Indiana, Officer Alicia Baker admitted she kissed, fondled, and engaged in oral sex with an inmate 4 or 5 times in the laundry room. In North Carolina, Ashley Danielle Hubbard was charged with sexual activity with an inmate after admitting to the relationship. In Mississippi, Tiffany Simmons was arrested for having sex with an inmate. These are just from recent months. The problem is systemic. Staffing shortages mean more overtime, more isolation, more vulnerability. Inmates have time to study staff members, to identify targets, to plan manipulation strategies. And corrections officers, underpaid, overworked, emotionally exhausted, become susceptible. The system creates the problem, then criminalizes the victims. But who's really to blame? The power difference between inmates and correctional officers is so extreme that it negates any ability for an inmate to consent to sex with a guard, wrote Jim Harvey and Kelly Shelton of the Rape Crisis Center of Central New Mexico. Corrections officers decide everything. When inmates eat, when they sleep, whether they get medication, whether they see visitors, whether they get transferred, whether disciplinary reports get filed. Inmates live in complete dependence. The very nature of incarceration is that inmates cannot make the minutest of decisions, like when or if to take a shower, what or when to eat, whether the lights are on or off, and when or whom they can call, Harvey and Shelton explained. In this environment, can an inmate truly consent? Or are they simply complying with someone who holds absolute power over them? The law says no consent is possible, even if both people claim they wanted the relationship, even if they describe it as love. The power imbalance makes true consent impossible. That's why the Prison Rape Elimination Act criminalizes all sexual contact, not just forced encounters, all of them, because in prison, consent cannot exist. The Department of Justice report revealed gender differences. 84% of female guards' relationships with male inmates appeared to be willing. But only 37% of male guards' relationships with female inmates qualified as willing. That means 63% of male guard-female inmate encounters involved clear coercion or force. Male guards sexually abuse female inmates at significantly higher rates. They use their power more directly, more violently. Female inmates become pregnant by guards. Male guards force sexual favors in exchange for necessities, tampons, soap, extra food. The abuse is systematic, widespread, and rarely prosecuted. Media coverage differs too. When female guards have sex with male inmates, headlines use softer language, relationship, affair, romance. When male guards abuse female inmates, the language sometimes remains soft, sexual activity, inappropriate conduct. But it's all sexual abuse under the law. All of it. Because inmates cannot consent. The power imbalance exists regardless of gender. But society treats these cases differently. We sexualize female guards and male inmates. We minimize male guards abusing female inmates. Both are wrong. Both are crimes. Both destroy lives. February 6, 2020. After serving 4 years of her 7-year sentence, Joyce Mitchell walked out of Bedford Hills Correctional Facility, released early for good behavior. She returned to Franklin County under community supervision until June 2022. The community was outraged. She could rot there, one resident said. She put a lot of people in danger. She should stay there. Mitchell served 4 years for helping 2 convicted murderers escape, for enabling a $23 million manhunt, for terrorizing communities for 3 weeks. Richard Matt is dead. David Sweat is serving life plus additional time for escape. Jean Palmer served 6 months. And Joyce Mitchell? Free after 4 years. She lives quietly now. Avoided media. Changed her name reportedly. Tries to move forward. But the case follows her. Escape at Dannemora, the Showtime miniseries directed by Ben Stiller and starring Patricia Arquette as Mitchell, aired in 2018. Won multiple awards. Arquette won Golden Globe, SAG, and Critics' Choice Awards for playing Mitchell. The escape became entertainment. A true crime story. a cautionary tale. But for Mitchell, it's permanent shame, permanent regret, a fantasy that destroyed her life. For men who never loved her. David Sweat is currently serving life in prison at Midstate Correctional Facility in Marcy, New York. He pleaded guilty to 2 felony counts of first-degree escape and 1 count of promoting prison contraband. Sentenced to 3.5 to 7 years, to be served consecutively with his previous life sentence without parole. He'll never get out. In March 2022, Sweat made headlines again. He went on a hunger strike. A judge authorized forced feeding and granted permission to use physical restraints, medications, and chemical sedation if necessary. Sweat has a history of hunger strikes and defiance. He's known for a history of manipulation, of using people. Joyce Mitchell was just one of many. Sweat gave investigators details about the escape, about Joyce Mitchell's involvement, about Richard Matt's manipulation tactics. He confirmed they planned to kill Lyle Mitchell. He admitted they never intended to take Joyce with them permanently. Joyce Mitchell would have just been luggage, authorities said based on Sweat's statements. She was always disposable, always temporary, always a means to an end. Sweat used her, then discarded her, and she helped him escape anyway. After Dannemora, prisons implemented new security measures, more frequent cell inspections, better tool control, increased staff training on boundary violations, background checks on relationships between staff and inmates. But the relationships continue. Vicky White and Casey White in 2022. Countless unnamed cases every month. Female guards getting pregnant by inmates. Male guards abusing female prisoners. Contraband smuggling. Escape assistance. The problem persists because the underlying factors remain. Understaffing. Inadequate training. Low pay. Emotional vulnerability. Isolation. Manipulation. Power imbalances. Until prisons address these systemic issues, the pattern will repeat. More Joyce Mitchells. More Vicky Whites. More escapes. More abuse. More destroyed lives. The question isn't whether it will happen again. It's when. And who. And how many people will be hurt. Because dangerous attachments behind bars aren't rare. They're not anomalies. They're predictable consequences of a broken system where isolation breeds obsession, where loneliness enables manipulation, where power imbalances make true consent impossible, and where vulnerable people make catastrophic choices for fantasies that were never real. Joyce Mitchell sits in her home today, free, but never truly free. She carries the weight of her choices, the public humiliation, the destroyed marriage, the lost career, the knowledge that she helped violent criminals terrorize communities, that she was willing to murder her husband for men who saw her as luggage. The fantasy cost her everything, and she's not alone. Across America, corrections officers are being manipulated right now. Inmates are studying them, identifying vulnerabilities, planning strategies, testing boundaries, and some officers are crossing lines they never thought they'd cross. For attention, for validation, for the fantasy of love in a place where real love cannot exist. The Prison Rape Elimination Act makes the law clear. Inmates cannot consent. Relationships are always abuse, always illegal, always destructive. But laws don't stop obsession, don't stop manipulation, don't stop people from believing dangerous fantasies. Joyce Mitchell believed Richard Matt and David Sweat loved her. They didn't. They used her. Vicky White believed Casey White loved her. He didn't. He used her. And she died for that belief. Died in a police chase. Gunshot to the head. For a man who saw her as an escape tool. This is the reality of forbidden bonds behind bars. Isolation becomes obsession. Loneliness becomes vulnerability. And manipulation disguises itself as love. Until it's too late. Until lives are destroyed. Until people are dead. And the pattern repeats. Because the system that creates these dynamics hasn't changed. The prisons are still understaffed. The inmates are still manipulative. And the officers are still human. Still vulnerable. still capable of catastrophic judgment errors when fantasy overrides reality. This is the Lockup, where forbidden bonds end in tragedy. Always. If this story shocked you, subscribe so I can show you more prison secrets nobody talks about. You won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching this truth about dangerous attachments behind bars. Now go drop your comment.